So we live in a world that seems very much unsettled. In fact, there are lots of things that happen that we don't really understand. And the argument often is that God is either not a good God because he lets such bad things happen, or that he's indifferent to the things that we do. But the reality is the Bible teaches us that God does care, and that there are outcomes that are awaiting those who make horrible choices. So we're not just talking about like natural disasters. We're talking about the reality of people just making awful choices. In Proverbs chapter 21, it says, "The violence of the wicked will drag them away, for they refuse to do what's right." Proverbs 21:18 says, "The wicked become a ransom for the righteous, and the unfaithful for the upright." And then in Proverbs 21:27, it says, "The sacrifice of the wicked is detestable. How much more so when brought with evil intent?" The challenge is accepting that just because it gives the impression of being bad doesn't necessarily mean that God has, or in any way, that God is going to disregard it. In fact, the Bible says that whatever it is that someone has done will come back to them in some way. And God will handle that. The challenge that we all face is that in the midst of all of that, can we find the good that is out there that God has put in place, perhaps through another person or perhaps through just his general work. So hopefully today you'll have a sense of that as you read Proverbs 21, and be mindful of the fact that while it may appear that evil is winning, God has assured us it does not. You know, one of the challenges that we always face is accepting that the God of creation sees each of us individually, but also corporately. That God has made each of us, even though obviously, you know, parents have a play in that, and the way that God has orchestrated everything kind of continues to move forward. But from the very beginning, that's the way God had it. And even today, as we live our lives, it's important to remember that that's what he's doing. Even as we remember that, one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that how we treat each other is a reflection on what we view about God, and ultimately what we view about ourselves. In Proverbs chapter 22, it says, "Rich and poor have this in common, the Lord is the maker of them all." Proverbs 22:16 says, "The one who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty." But the center of this, I think, comes in Proverbs 22:9, where it says, "The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor." I think part of the challenge that we all have is accepting that whatever God is doing, he's doing it with purpose. And you and I have a responsibility to take care of and be mindful of other people in the process. And the beauty of what he says in 23:9 is that we have, or 22:9 is that we have this promise of God. The generous are generous because they share their food with the poor, meaning they share their wealth and they share their hope with those who don't have it. Keep that in mind today as you read Proverbs 22. When I was younger, the only thing I wanted to do was grow up and have lots of money. I don't know if that stemmed from the fact that I didn't feel like we had much. I don't know if it stemmed from the fact that everything that seemed to matter always came with the idea of, if you're going to be successful in life, you're going to have money. You're going to have to be able to fend for yourself. And money always was like a sign of power. But the truth is that you can never have enough money, because the more money you have, the more things you feel like you can do with it. And the reality is that most of us will spend our lives chasing after money or chasing after wealth, but never really knowing how to spend it the right way. The author of Proverbs in chapter 23 says this, verses 4 and 5, "Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle." It's not that money is bad, because it's not. Money at the end of the day is just paper, or it's Bitcoin, or it's credit card, or whatever it may be. It has no moral tie into anything. It's how we spend it. But it's also why we acquire it that can make money bad. What the author of Proverbs says is, don't chase after something that ultimately is just going to go away anyway, or more importantly, can go away before you do. Instead, chase after the things that matter, and if you do happen to get money along the way, figure out how to spend it in such a way that it doesn't become the only thing you're pursuing in life. Enjoy Proverbs today. One of the most important things that we can understand about life is that it's not the single events that are the sum total, but the events themselves that all come together and make us who we are. One of the great things about wisdom is that the more we employ wisdom, the more firm the foundation is that we're building on in our lives. Wisdom is a series of choices that we've been given an opportunity to make, but we have to make them. And a lot of times what happens is we fail to maybe think about the way in our lives that we've used wisdom. And the author of Proverbs in chapter 24 emphasizes a unique understanding of wisdom when he says, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. I love this because I think it's really important. You and I are going to go through life, and our house is who we are. And if it's built on wisdom, then he says, through understanding, it's established. That when you and I have an understanding of what we're doing and where we're going, we know what God's called us to, and wisdom helps us to build that home. But here's what I really love. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. You know, one of the most important things we can do in life is to acknowledge we are building up rare and beautiful treasures everywhere we go. Wisdom allows us to store them in our minds like a great hallway. And as we walk through that hallway, we see the pictures of those rare and beautiful treasures that have been what we have used wisdom to build our house upon. So give that some thought as you read Proverbs 24 today. You know, sometimes I think that we think a lot of ourselves. We just do. We don't give much thought necessarily to other people, even though we might say in tongue that we are. Like, hey, you know, I'm really thinking about you today, or whatever it is, or hey, I'm praying for you today. But the truth is, part of what we've done with that is just to identify that we've done something we want somebody to celebrate us for. The other thing that's challenging is to acknowledge that sometimes, even in the most friendliest of situations, that sometimes people still need some space. The author of Proverbs says something. He says, Proverbs 25, seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, too much of you and they will hate you. My mom, I would come home from college from time to time, and I'd be there for a couple of days, and my mom would say to me, Mike, you know, company's like fish. After a couple of days, it starts to stink. And all I could think to myself was, you're my mom. What in the world? But I think at the end of the day, she was just being clever and saying, hey, you know, just be mindful to don't come in and be a nuisance in someone's house. You know, sometimes we take our liberty and our freedom and our friendships maybe a little bit too far and assume that our friends always want to hear from us, always want to be around us, always want to be, and we don't give any respect to the fact that maybe we should ask them, hey, is it cool if I call you? Is it cool if we stop, have some lunch, whatever it is? I think that that's an important thing. One of the other things that I love about the author of Proverbs is that he reminds those people who are maybe in good, high positions, you know, these students that he's training, they may find themselves among some pretty important people, and that they have to keep their head about themselves, not get cocky about it. So he says in Proverbs 25, 6 and 7, he says, do not exalt yourself in the king's presence, and do not claim a place among his great men. It's better for him to say to you, come up here, than to have him humiliate you before his nobles. There's nothing like that situation when you thought you were super important, and the person who really is reminded that you weren't. And so the author of Proverbs says this ultimately, keep humility at place. Remember, friendships and relationships are valuable, so treat them like they are. Make sure not to be around too long and end up stinking up the place. And also, don't think that you're so big that you get to sit wherever you want to, because someone may come along and say, hey, that's my seat, I need you to move. God bless you. Proverbs 25, have a good day.